This Christmas, remember, your favorite author is also a small business. Check out the Tiki Man and the Viking YouTube channel for our Small Business Saturday ad and several other local author books. And happy holidays from Tiki Man and the Viking. In this episode of Tiki Man and the Viking podcast, we do our second part interview with Eckhard Gerdes, who just released the book The Land of Lost Simulacra.
Your other major thing that you do is Jeff, that you refer to it, a Journal of Experimental Fiction. When did that start? What's that all about?
Well, I wanted to start a literary kind of publishing project, and I wasn't sure what to call it. And my wife, at the time, she passed away some years ago, but she said, "Well, why not just call it what it is, and call it the Journal of Experimental Fiction?" And I said, "Duh, yeah, sure." And yeah, and so I started that. It was about 1986, I think. I came up
Wow.
with the first idea for it. It really started going more in the 90s when I started really publishing regularly. For a while, I was teaching down in Georgia and had some faculty development money or something that I was able to access to use for the publishing, and that was fun. I was able to have an issue about John Barth and met John Barth and had a lecture from him that he let me publish in the journal.
Fantastic!
So that was great. I had a great time with introducing him at a conference that we were hosting at the college there, and then had lunch with him and his wife and a bunch of other faculty people, and they were delightful. John Barth's wife was very funny.
How do you come out with a collection yearly now, or is it
probably biannually now? Every other year. Mostly, I just do the monographs, the novels by people, and so on. Occasionally, slip into nonfiction, or I've done even a couple of books of poetry, a new book of poetry by Yuri Tarnowski.
Yes, I saw that recently. Yes.
But mostly I try to stick to the experimental fiction. There's not much of a market for it, but somebody has to do it, and I do it.
People do have it. Like, for example, Offbeat Quirky from 2017, and if I look on the back, there's one last name here that says Burlow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right, because I got a piece. That's I think that's where our connection started. I came across you. I saw that you were soliciting for pieces, and I said, I got this piece. I don't know if it fits. I'm gonna just brush it up, send it in, and what do you know? And I reread that, and I reread a few others before this interview tonight, and I'm just impressed by the quality, the imagination, and I think that's what's distinctive about experimental fiction. If you allow yourself to accept it, it is refreshing in one regard. Yes, you can read James Patterson over and over again and get the sense of it, and it seems like sometimes it's cut and paste, and then you come across something that is either postmodern or it's experimental. And what's great about this collection, and I'm sure the others, is that it is short fiction. I mean, if you're going to say, I'm going to get into postmodernism and I'm going to pick up Infinite Jest, it's like, pick that up during retirement, because you're not going to have the time to read it if you work a 40-hour week. So the short fiction is impressive and it's refreshing. What are your criteria? I mean, you have your own preferences. When you're getting all these submissions, what are your criteria for inclusion? And I'm not asking so I can pump up my own ego. I actually want to know why I was included. Why are any of these people included in this collection?
They're fresh and interesting and unusual. So I met Miriam Patchen, Kenneth Patchen's widow. Okay. And Kenneth Patchen, I did my master's thesis on him. A wonderful novelist. So Sleepers Awake was my favorite novel, and that was the touchstone for my thesis. But he also wrote a novel called See You in the Morning. And that was because his publisher, Max Pedell, said to him, kind of tongue-in-cheek, after Sleepers Awake was published, which is typographically all over the place and very expensive to publish, he said, boy, after the expense that this book cost, you owe me a bestseller. And Kenneth Patchen thought he was being serious. So he sat down to write like a standard kind of potboiler bestseller type book about a man who goes to, who knows he's dying of cancer and goes to a resort to stay there in the resort while he's dying, and falls in love with the chambermaid, and doesn't tell her that he's dying. It's like this real kind of melodramatic thing. And I asked her about that. Why did he write that book? The others are so experimental, and this is like so straightforward. And she said, "Oh, he hated writing it." He said that he kept saying, "I can't stand this. He said, she said stuff. This is driving me crazy." So that's kind of one thing I look for. Is it just a he said, she said? Is it just like a standard kind of straightforward story? It can be a great straightforward story. I love reading standard straightforward stories, but that's not what this is the publisher for.
Right.
There's so many other places for that. I wanted to seek out the idiosyncratic, the stuff where I say to my students, I say, you'll know that you have done something significant if you can point to it when you're done and say, only I, of all people on the face of this planet, could have done this. And then you've really contributed something to the sum total of human knowledge. And thank you. That's a great thing to do.
That blows me away. That's you want to. It's about finding your own voice. That's the classic expression that any teacher would say. You're going to find your own voice. It's an amalgamation of others that you have read, other people that you've encountered. But by the same token, it is uniquely yours. Absolutely. Now, of course, you named the Kenneth Patchen Award after Mr. Patchen. When did that start?
Well, the Kenneth Patchen Award had been administered by Pig Iron Press in Pittsburgh for quite a while. But Jim Villani, I don't know if you know him by name, but Jim Villani kind of abandoned it. And he was doing poetry and all sorts of stuff for the Patchen Award. And so I asked him, I said, well, do you mind if I pick up the baton here and keep running with it? And he said, no, go for it. So then I started doing the award just for fiction, for the innovative novel.
Okay.
And because that was what I thought was, for me, what the most important work of Patchen's was. Memoirs of a Shy Pornographer, A Journal of Albion Moonlight, and Sleepers Awake, those three books especially. And so I got the permission to use the name. I went ahead and started soliciting for manuscripts and got enough to be able to keep it going. It's not a lucrative contest. It breaks even, just barely breaks even every year, but that's okay, because I do that because, first of all, Kenneth Patchen should be remembered. It was such an important literary figure.
Wow, yeah.
Probably best known, I think, for his love poems. He wrote hundreds and hundreds of love poems. Every single book of his was dedicated to his wife, and but I loved his fiction. That was what was the deepest thing for me when I saw what he was doing in fiction. I was already writing experimental fiction. I had a roommate who was a book dealer, and he gave me a copy of Sleepers Awake and said, "Look at this. This is kind of like what you're doing, Eckhard." And I looked at it and I said, "Oh my God, here I thought I had come up with some of this stuff on my own. And here's this guy who had done it 30 years before me." It's like, oh, I didn't even realize. But it was intimidating, but it was also, in a way, validating.
Exactly. I was writing something, and then I came across the expression of metafiction, and I realized what I was writing was metafiction. I'm like looking over my shoulders to say somebody's tapping me on the shoulder, going, "Hey, dummy, we've already done that." And when you come across something that you feel is unique, but it's already existed, you're like, okay, what can I do, and how can I make it different? And that's what you brought up. Now, okay, you've got something coming out potentially this fall,
right? Yeah.
Give us the skinny on it, title and synopsis. What do you got?
Okay, it's called The Land of Lost Simulacra. Okay. And as the title kind of implies, it has kind of an academic kind of setting. A new hire at a university shows up at a university that had been closed for about 10 years because that state had closed all education, all libraries, all of that was banned and was closed. And he arrives at this college after a new governor has taken over and wants to open everything up again.
Okay.
But of course, there's no infrastructure, there's no money, so it's opened, but everything is dilapidated after 10 years of neglect. The bathrooms can't be used, the stairs are falling apart, and this guy can't find his department. He goes to where he thought the department office is, and it's completely in shambles and abandoned. And he goes to a class to teach his first class because he found a list of where he's supposed to teach posted somewhere. He goes to the class, and there's a spin class going on in that room at the same time. So he tries to lecture on his subject while these people are doing their spinning, and he can't tell if they're there as his students that just happen to be bicycling, or if they're actually just spin class students and he's in the wrong room, but he gives a lecture there anyway. Sometimes they don't even show up. He's like, well, this is what I was hired to do. So he gives the lecture to nobody, but he's doing it. And everything is a mess for him, but he finds a couple of other faculty members who are kind of also like-minded and don't like this new situation or the situation that the college is in. And they realize there is no leadership at the school at all. They hang out at the building where the president's office is, and they never see a president enter or leave the college. There's no administrators working, so they figure they'll just pose as the administrators and start ordering things to be done, and do that for a while. But that doesn't work for very long. But
school by anarchy.
Brian, could you confirm this is like every teacher's fantasy then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, maybe not the building falling apart because sometimes
Right.
that's a little too real, but
We have encountered countless writers who are teachers or teachers who are writers, and it's just amazing what that profession brings to writing. Separate from the old doofus who's been in customer service for 40 plus years. Teachers have a very unique perspective. And I think this book that you've got coming out seems, from just talking with you this evening, tied so much into your teaching career.
It is. It's also tied to nightmares I was having, recurring nightmares, probably from the teaching. And I couldn't stop this recurring nightmare where I was on campus and I had to use the bathroom and I couldn't find a functioning bathroom. I'd go into one bathroom and all the toilets would be ripped out. They're just holes in the floor. And it was agony to try to find a bath. And this was the recurring nightmare. And I said, the only way to get rid of this is to write this out. And once I've written it down, I can be done with it.
Yeah.
That is a teaching anxiety nightmare right there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Teaching itself is an anxiety from some of the stories you've told, Brian.
At times, yes.
Yes. Absolutely. To wrap up, why would you like people out there who read historical crime fiction or fantasy or horror or sci-fi, what would you say to them in terms of encouraging them to pick up something that's experimental fiction? Why should they do so, and what do you think they'll get out of it?
Well, I think if they're willing to lay aside their presuppositions of what's supposed to happen and just let the book work on that, so be open to new possibilities, they will be delighted. They will find what they do like in fiction within this new form.
Okay,
So
good.
there are speculative elements, there are fantasy elements. All of these are tools that can be used. We have so many tools as writers, and I've never understood why some writers say, well, I'm just going to use two tools. That's like the carpenter who shows up with just a hammer and says, this is all I need. And I say, well, no, I'd rather have a carpenter who's got a full understanding of all of the different tools that are available.
Right.
And I think if you can go and kind of enjoy seeing somebody playing with their tools. I love that. When I read a novel and I can see that the writer was enjoying writing the novel, that this is something that really was a pleasure for the writer, that turns me on. I'm like, oh, this is good, because this is something that meant something that deeply to the writer that it overjoyed him, or her or them, and I think that's an important way of engaging, so that it's not just about sitting back and allowing the writer to do everything for me as a reader. I was surprised and disturbed in some of my like narratology classes to hear some writers talking about seducing the reader, and that really disgusted me because as a reader, I'm not reading a book because I want to sleep with the writer. I'm reading the book because I want to be engaged intellectually and maybe in other ways, but that's not my reason, and that's not a purpose I would have in my writing. And I thought that really demeaned the role of the writing, and also it's insulting to the reader. Say, dear silly little tiny reader, hold the big papa's hand while I lead you through this story. Look to the left, there's a house. Look to the right. That I don't need that. I don't like hand-holdy fiction. I like to be challenged. I'm an adult. I don't need to have my hand held. So that was kind of a touchstone for me there too. That I thought I want to be given the facts directly. You don't have to couch it in a tale for me. I don't need Aesop's fables. I I want to be challenged. William Gass used to talk about that. He said he liked in his writing to set up hurdles for his readers because he wanted gymnastic readers. He didn't want flabby, out of shape readers. He wanted readers who were good readers, and so he set up those hurdles to scare the faint of heart away. And I thought, oh, I like that.
No, okay. So most of us try to find our readers. I mean, we talk about that. Brian and I talk about that all the time. He's been to Comic-Con here in Wichita, did a wonderful thing. I'm trying to get things set up at Historical Museum here in town because that's what I write. So we talk about that from genre fiction. How do you find your readers?
Well, it's a challenge. I correspond. I have a Facebook group for experimental fiction
Right.
that seems to have attracted quite a few people, who have this mindset, that open-mindedness to engage with other kinds of texts. It was a much larger group at one point, and then Facebook booted me out because I think I posted a picture of Woody Guthrie with his guitar, and somehow that this machine kills fascists slogan must have shocked the system there enough at Facebook that they booted me out. So I had to start a new account. So it's a smaller group now than it was originally, but that's okay. I think the core people are still there, and they like engaging with each other's work and seeing what other people are up to, and that makes me happy. I also know people through teaching and so on. It's very interesting. One of my colleagues who I've also published, Jeff Wiseman, he was a student of Ron Sukenik's, and one of my friends was Raymond Fetterman, and Sukenik and Fetterman were buddies. So it's kind of like, my buddy's mentor and my mentor were kind of friends with each other. So, you build kind of a network of like-minded people just because you stumble across them so often. You stumble across the same names. And, I've gone to conferences, to AWP and MLA and so on. And it's nice to run across people that you're like-minded with. They're kind of hard to find at those big conferences, especially AWP. It's, every kind of writing from, A to Z. So you have to kind of figure out how to weave through that. But there are more specific ones. There was an And Now conference for a while for innovative writing, and that was fun. I went to that. The one at Notre Dame was great. I hosted a session there at that conference on innovative writing, and that was very interesting.
Do you find that the use of the expression innovative writing may draw in people more than experimental writing? I mean, there is a different mindset between the two words.
Right, and I think the problem with the word experimental for some people is that they think that that means that the writer doesn't know what they're doing, and
Good
and they're
point.
just kind of goofing around and playing. And that's not what I look at it as at all. You know, it's like I wouldn't think that experimental psychology was just psychologists who are goofing around. You know, I think it's a serious pursuit, and I think it's just a lack of awareness. You know, it's not something that's talked about much, certainly not academically much anymore. So uh, and that, I guess that's part of my challenge is to try to make more people aware of it, and not to be just knee jerk adverse to the term, but to to
Right.
think about it to a larger extent. What could this mean? What could this embrace? And I think it has so many different possibilities that it can embrace. It can embrace fiction that in all ways, in all other ways, looks completely normal, but just has one unusual element to it that makes it offbeat and quirky. Right?
Aha.
Yeah.
Yeah, as the title goes. I mean, for me personally, I find it to be, and Brian knows this, for years my blog has all been about cooking and writing because those are the two creative pursuits in my life, the ones that make me feel most empowered. And I find that uh, attempting to write flash fiction or a different genre or something experimental like a metafiction is the same thing as going from stir fry to trying to bake cannolis. It's like you're still using the tools that you have, you're
Right.
just using different ingredients. For me as a writer, I enjoy the challenge, and it's like exercising. It's exercising the mind and exercising the creativity. Would you recommend that a writer who is, let's say, and I hate the expression writer's block, but if you had writer's block, would you recommend to somebody, well, why don't you try reading this person and seeing if you can't write in that field or in that lane?
Well, I think the book I would recommend is probably Raymond Queneau's Exercises in Style, where he takes one story and he tells it, I don't know, 23 different ways. I forgot the number, but it's the same story over and over again. But he shows that how you present it changes it and changes how you react to it and what actually happens in the story
Wow. Okay.
affected. I think that shows the different possibilities and these choices we make. Now, I don't really sit there and think this is the choice I'm going to make because it's intuitive. There's so much of this is intuitive, and of course, having been writing, I wrote my first novel when I was 16, so I've been doing this for 50 years. Um, I think I built up a pretty large stockpile of tools,
Hmm.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to use all of the tools all of the time. That's
Correct.
impossible. But there are times when, oh, this is the perfect time to use that tool, or this is the perfect time to use that tool, or maybe these two tools together will create an interesting effect. So that I have the ability to kind of uh, sculpture and craft the writing. And I like the analogy of sculpture, of course, to fiction, especially because fiction is from the Latin fictus, which is the past tense of fingere, which means to fashion by hand, right? Like manipulate by hand. So I would say fiction is much more akin to sculpture and pottery than it is to storytelling. The storytelling is a verbal art,
Right.
and fiction is a manual art. And there's a big distinction in that, and they're both great strategies, and of course storytelling is a very effective tool to use in fiction, but by no means is it the only one.
And that's a very interesting perspective. Brian, do you remember a while back we were talking? I had this concept, and Eckhard has just validated it. I went beyond the plotter and pantser
Mhm.
analogies to the sculptor and the potter as writing styles. There are a lot of people that will write for their first draft 100,000 words and then try to trim it down to 80. Me, I'm the opposite. I'm the potter just trying to get to 50 and get the story out, and then my subsequent drafts are added on and built up. Um, but in both cases, what you've just defined from the Latin root, it does seem to be much more hands-on of an analogy than the plotter and the pantser, which seems to be so prosaic, and I think that's something that we can take from. It is a hands-on, and we're not just talking about hands on the keyboard, but it is a very exacting process. And a lot of people think we just sit down at our desk and just bang out those words, and they just come plopping out. And Brian's fantasy book that came out, was it 2 years ago?
Which one?
Dark Cry of
Dark Cry.
Valor?
That's let's see, that came out 2018.
Okay. And Brian and he had been talking about that for a far longer period of time. And we were actually in a critique group where he was bringing up pieces of that. So that's been gestating for quite some time.
Oh,
And instead of moving forward, tell him what you've done
yeah.
with that.
I created a character and kind of wrote myself into a corner and solved it and ended up loving the character so much I've gone back and written 2 prequels.
Excellent. That was William Burroughs said that. He said all he ever did was just set up the characters, then run around behind them with a notepad, trying to write down what they're doing.
Yeah.
And sometimes those characters are just like that. That was like Chronicles for me. It was just the characters just carried me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And the funny thing is, I told HB and I was at a conference many moons ago, and he asked what I was writing, and that's when I just laid out this entire plot system. The original novel was 3 chapters of the first book, and I had a 7-book run on this. I so far still have those 3 chapters written, and I've now gone backwards. So there's no telling what this is going to turn into. I'm going to have to teach my kids to write this because I may not be around anymore.
These could be the Chronicles of Aristide, by the way, by the time it's done.
Join us in a couple weeks when we conclude our interview with Eckhard Gerdes. Until then, read a book.